Hi, I'm Dr. Petty with Carolina Chiropractic. Today I'm here with my friend Peter, and he is a financial advisor. We're going to be talking about several different money strategies that we should be using at this time during this market that we're going through. And you have 24 years of experience as a financial advisor, right? And you have a BS from Penn State in finance, and you are the owner of this advisory company. Please say it so I don't say it incorrectly.
Yep, Kiaros Advisors.
Kiaros. Okay, thank you. Peter Kisver, you're a friend of mine, and I appreciate you coming on my show. We're going to talk about the baby steps. We're going to talk about what the difference between traditional IRAs and what the difference between Roth IRAs are, well as should we be putting money into our 401k and all these kinds of things. So our first question are, what are Dave Ramsey's baby steps? Because I know you're a Dave Ramsey affiliate and you have been for 3 years, correct?
Yep. Yeah, thanks Adam for having me. I think it's an incredible time to be talking about this stuff with everything that's going on. So hopefully we can have some tips and advice to help some folks out there. Before we get into the Dave Ramsey's baby steps, there's a couple things I wanted to touch on before getting into the steps. So before you commit to any sort of financial plan or baby step process, you want to make sure your spouse or significant other is on board. It's very important.
Absolutely.
You will find an uphill battle if you're in it yourself. So that's one thing that's very important. Just kind of check in, have a discussion, and kind of get everybody within the household on board. Number two is commit to not creating any new debt. We'll get into the debt. It's okay to have debt to start this process, but you really want to commit to not having any new debt. That creates a
backwards ball or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's really tough. You'll be spinning your wheels. So that's number two. And then the third point is create a budget. You know, it's not fun. People hear budget and it's, I don't want to sit down and create a budget with my spouse.
Sounds like a 4-letter word, right?
Yes, but it's important. So you want to commit to sitting down, putting your income and all your expenses down, and it's an important part of the process.
If I can say something about the budget, we thought it was going to be really hard to do a budget, my wife and I. We did Dave Ramsey about 11 years ago. It was when we first went through his Financial Peace University. And we were like, oh my goodness, we're going to have to go on a budget. We got to do a budget. We got to do a budget. And oddly enough, within like 2 weeks into it, we felt like we had more money on this budget than we ever did before not having a budget, or at least not having a proper budget.
I've heard that many times. They never realized what they were spending it on, and sometimes they realized they had more money within the budget for things that they didn't realize. So it's not the most exciting word, but it's very important.
Right.
So let's get to the steps. The Dave Ramsey baby steps, there's 7 total, and they will work. You do want to follow them in order. So I'll go through with Adam, each step, just to kind of give people an overview. Baby step 1 is create a small emergency fund, $1,000. This is $1,000 in the bank in addition to your monthly budget. So you need to have your monthly, checking account money for your regular expenses, and this would be in addition to that in a savings account. That's the easiest step. After step 1 is in place, you want to move on to step 2, which is eliminating your debt other than the mortgage. So what you want to do is put out all your debt on a piece of paper in a spreadsheet.
It's a little daunting.
Yes.
Especially for 2 people that have grad degrees.
That's right. Student loans, car loans, credit cards, do not hide anything. Now is the time to put it all out on the table, because we need to create a plan to eliminate all of the debt. And we will later in some of the questions really get into the best strategy of eliminating that debt. So that's probably the hardest step, step 2. It may take months. For most people, it takes years. And again, we will give you some good advice to get the most effective way to get rid of all that debt. So once you're lucky enough to get out of step 2, move on to step 3. Step 3 is a larger emergency fund. And typically you want this to be 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. So like
which is a great thing to have in a crisis like
yes,
this that we're going through.
this was the perfect example.
Yes. No one could have predicted it.
That's right. Just like a job loss, a car goes,
Mm-hmm.
this is in place for those unexpected emergencies. So you don't dip into the credit card. You don't feel like you have to take another loan out. So this is in place to make sure we don't go back to step 2 and create more debt. And this recent event was perfect, because if you had that 3 to 6 month emergency fund, it probably eased your nerves a little bit, knowing you have some extra money in a bank account in case something like this happens.
And it is stressful, whether you have it or don't, but it takes a lot of that stress off. Imagine if you had 3 to 6 months in there and you're like, okay, good, not going to be as worrisome. Hopefully it'll be done in that time frame.
Totally agree. Peace of mind is really the best thing about that step 3, is just knowing when something happens, you can pay cash for it and you won't have to go into any sort of debt. Once that's in place, then we move on to step 4. That is where we get our retirement going. So whether it's your employer plan, IRAs, and we'll go into greater detail as far as the best retirement products to use, but the recommended amount is at least 15% of household income should be going towards a retirement account. And again, we will definitely get into the details of which accounts are best and how much to put into each.
Which sounds like a lot, but after you do your budget, if you haven't already, you realize that 15% of your budget probably is going to debt right now. And so you'll have as much money as you are having, if not more. The difference is it's rolling over and now doing compounding interest and such.
That's exactly the way I would have put it. I like to tell people, you're now paying yourself instead of paying these debtors. You're not paying interest on the loans, the car loan, the student loans, the credit card loans. You're now paying yourself, and now you're getting that compounded interest. So all the money or cash flow that was going towards the debt is now going into your future and your retirement.
Absolutely.
You move on to step 5, which is college savings. For some, there could be scholarships in play, but for most, they want to save something for their children. And the best way to do this is through an education savings account, ESA, or a 529 plan. They pretty much do the same thing. You put money in after tax, it grows tax-free, and it comes out tax-free as long as it's used for education. So that is important after retirement. Step 4 is in place, move on to a college savings plan. Okay. Once that's in place, we move on to step 6, which is pay the house off. This is retirement is in a good spot. We've got the college savings going. Now, if there's extra money, you want to pay some extra payments to your mortgage principal, because we're getting close to the end of the steps, and that's the last debt that needs to get paid off. So any additional resources that are in place, you want to throw at your mortgage, and that will really get that mortgage down instead of paying the minimum payment every month. The next step and the final step is step 7, and it's really continue to build wealth and give. It's the most satisfying step. You're continuing to build wealth by having your investments in place, and you're able to give. You have no mortgage, you have no debt. Hopefully there's some additional cash flow. You can
bless others at this point, right?
Yeah, I've heard, if folks want to have a legacy to their children or their grandchildren, you can donate to your favorite charities. I hear stories where you're in a restaurant and you give 100% tip and you see the expression on the server's face. That is the most satisfying thing to folks. And that's really where people enjoy the ability to give. And that's the last step, is you've secured your financial future, and now you have the ability and the choice to give as you choose.
Absolutely. And that's the 7 steps, right? And the step that all of us want to be in is 7, but a step that a lot of us get stuck in is 2. So I'm going to revert back to 2 and ask a little bit. Is it okay if we were to try to pay off some debt while at the same time trying to save some money?
Great question. I get it all the time. So most people do tackle both at one time, but
Makes it a little harder to get step 2 done.
It does. You really want to stop any investments and focus on the debt. The reason why is you're really spinning your wheels. If your interest rate on the debt is on average 8, 9, 10%, you'd be lucky to earn that in your investments. So you're really kind of, breaking even. You really want to put your investments on hold and attack the debt. And it's really known as a snowball effect. So back to step 2, you want to put all your debts on paper in a spreadsheet and list them smallest to largest. You want to attack the smallest debt first, and that means you pay the minimum payment on all the other debts, and you put every additional dollar towards that smaller debt until it's paid off, and then you move to the next.
I think he describes that as getting the little victories. If your first little debt is a credit card, you got $50 on it, then you're like, all right, one down, and then you got another thing that's got $150. You're like, all right, I got 2 down,
That's
and
right.
you get to then roll those into the next debt. What are different ways that you can save for retirement? Like investment strategies? You can have a Roth, or you can have a traditional IRA, or you can have a 401k, or some people are all about real estate or whatever.
Once you're at step 4, which is debt's paid off, emergency fund in place, it's now let's get our retirement savings going. So if you're lucky enough, I would look to your employer first. If they have an employer plan, 401k, 403b, TSP account, that's where I would start. Enroll in a plan, contact HR to get it going if you have any questions. If you're lucky enough, you'll have an employer match. So you always want to take advantage of the match first. Even if you don't have a match, that's a great place to start. Secondly, you can do both. If you don't have that employer plan available, you can always do an IRA. An IRA is short for individual retirement account. So it's not tied to an employer. There's a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, and a SEP IRA. A SEP IRA is really for self-employed people. So they give the option for a person who's self-employed or has a few employees to have a retirement plan. The traditional and Roth IRAs are really available for anybody. They have certain income limits. Most people qualify. If you make a lot of money, you will not be able to contribute to these IRAs. But that's where I would really look to get your retirement savings going. Start with your employer plan, and then look to supplement those employer plans with the IRAs, or do the IRAs by themselves.
Right, and the reason you're saying the 401k first is because, like, my wife's 401k, so I'm self-employed, I have a SEP. The reason you say that is because, like, they match up to a certain percent, which is gaining instantly 100%.
Correct.
Rate of return. Name any IRA or whatever else that tries to earn that. It doesn't happen, right?
Correct.
And then, anything above whatever that 100% that they match is, we try to move into things that we can control and put them into things that we want better, like a traditional or Roth IRA.
Yep.
And that's what you're kind of saying, right?
Exactly. And just to touch on the differences between the traditional and the Roth, there are big differences. I definitely prefer the Roth IRA. The traditional is money that's contributed into it pre-tax. And what that means is you actually get to write off the money that goes into a traditional IRA on your taxes. The downside is, as you're taking any money out, it's all taxable. 100% of the money that's coming out is taxable. Plus, if you ever need to access the money before 59.5, there's an additional 10% penalty. The Roth IRA, much more lenient on rules. So you go in after tax. So the money that you put in has already been taxed. However, it grows tax-free. Any money that comes out tax-free. Plus, you can take money out before 59.5, any contributions that you've put in. So if you put in $20,000 in the last 3 years and you need $20,000 to come out, it comes out all tax-free and penalty-free. So those are some big differences between the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA.
Right. Okay, so one of the things that Dave Ramsey advises is mutual funds as opposed to individualized stocks. And so a lot of us want to know why mutual funds, as well as like what exactly is a mutual fund, and how do you like read a prospectus or anything like that to choose one?
Yep. So a mutual fund is really a collection of hundreds of stocks. So when you buy one fund, you're literally buying 4, 5, sometimes 600 individual stocks in one fund. So it gives you that instant diversification. You know, many people probably heard that word, you know, related to investing, and it's crucially important. Very, very important, because it gives you many, many stocks where when you're buying one stock, if that stock, you know, something happens and it goes down, you know, you could lose 50% in a day. Where a mutual fund will never lose 50% one day. If 1 or 2 stocks, you know, go bad or go bankrupt, you're really okay, because all the other stocks in there will probably go up. So there's instant diversification, and that's really where the popularity of mutual funds has really increased in the last 20, 30 years, where the old way of investing was pick individual stocks, where now it's more of buy mutual funds, and there's much less risk. There's still risk involved, but there's much less risk in mutual funds than buying individual stocks.
And so like mutual funds, what I like about them is they have a team, right?
Yep.
People that are literally, that's their job, is to watch that, so that if they're like, oh no, this stock's going to tank, you know, they can get out of it, you know, before it tanks.
Yep.
Whereas you and I specifically would be out with patients or whatever and wouldn't know that it's tanking. I'm losing, you know, $1,000 a minute. Not that I have that kind of investing, but you know what I mean? Like if I was in that mutual fund, those guys are changing that instantly. And
Yep.
usually when one's going down, another one's going up. And they know and see that ride, right?
That's it. There's a management team assigned to every mutual fund. And every mutual fund has an objective, a goal, you know, to buy large cap growth, to buy small cap value stocks. And their job is to review, watch, just like Adam said, to make changes when they feel like it's necessary. So that's their full-time job, is to manage that fund. And there's usually a management team that's in charge of running the mutual fund.
Right, and as you said, like they might have a growth or a value, and growth is we think that this market is going to take off,
Correct.
right? Whereas value is like, well, everything's on a value right now in this current market, and so now's a great time to buy. It's all on sale,
That's
kind
right.
of thing, right? Okay, whereas you know, like if I'd have bought all Amazon stock, you know, in the '90s, I'd have been a millionaire, but I could have just as easily bought, you know, Enron and been completely broke.
That's right.
And that's where the
That's right.
safety of a mutual fund is, right?
That's right. And I tell clients, it's okay to have individual stocks and own individual stocks. Just make sure it's not a large percentage of your entire nest egg, of your entire retirement. You know, 5, 10, 15% is okay. Where folks get in trouble is if it's half and they have one stock that's not doing well. That will really affect and impact when you retire. So as long as you keep it to a small percentage, it is okay to own individual stocks.
But I'm going to run through a couple and kind of group some people together. One of the scenarios was that a couple, one spouse's job was secure and the other spouse in this market was kind of like, well, they might not be employed in a month or so. And so like, how important is it to be in different steps, like trying to really pay off that mortgage, or should we building up that savings, or should we be, you know, investing at different stages or whatnot?
Great question, especially in the environment we're in now. You really want to freeze everything. If you're investing in 401ks, in 403bs, if you're paying extra to the mortgage, you really want to put everything on hold. Look at your emergency fund. If it's currently at 3 months, bump it up to 6 months. Anything that's unexpected, like a possible, you know, employment termination, anything like that, I would look to up your emergency fund. Then that will give you confidence. If that event happens, you now have an extra buffer. So I know it may be tough to put some things on hold. Once your emergency fund is back up to a good spot, you can, you know, start those things that you did hold. But I would look to definitely put that at least at 6 months in that scenario.
So they were like dual military spouses, and so their job was ultra secure. Like they weren't worried about losing their job in this economy or anything along those lines. And they don't have any kids, and they're like, hey, what do we do with our money? Like, how do we start to save? How do we, invest? Because we realize that things are on sale. This is a good time to start. And how much money does it take to start? We're kind of grouping all of those questions into one.
Yep. Like I said, once you're in a good place to invest, it's very easy and does not take a lot to start. So in that scenario, if jobs are secure, I would absolutely look to start your retirement. Most investment firms, there's no minimum to start. I know the mutual funds that I work with, it's a $50 monthly minimum to go. So what you do is you link your bank account to your investment account, and it's an ongoing monthly investment.
Draft and such, right?
Just like when it comes out of your 401k plan, or out of your paycheck into your 401k plan. You can do a lump sum, if you want to start investing with $1,000 or $100 or $500. So you don't need anything to start, as long as you're putting in a monthly contribution as like an auto draft.
Which then just becomes a line item on your budget and so forth.
And from my experience with clients, once it starts, people and families really learn to live without that money. It becomes part of the budget, and hopefully it continues for many years to come. And the biggest step is really getting it started. Yeah. Once it's started, people really figure out how to live without it.
The only last question I would ask is, like, say someone is just a couple is close to retirement, and they're kind of like, oh my goodness, we've lost X percent in the market right now. Like, we were planning on retiring in a couple of years. How do we either recoup that? Like, what is it Dave Ramsey says? Slow is sexy in investing, right? Steady and sexy or whatnot. But like, how do they know it's okay to still hit that goal, or how could they kind of look at it in that realm?
Yep. So taking a step back, in this time where we went through, a big downturn in the market, in the economy, it's important to continue to invest based on your goals. As long as there's not, something that's pending, like a job loss, continue to invest. It is important to not stop investing or take your current investments and sell them to cash, because right now is when, and Adam said it previously, stocks are on sale. So now you want to buy in. You either want to continue to buy in what your current plan is, or if you're lucky enough to add more. If you were doing X in your 401k and there was more money in the budget, add. As stocks are down, eventually they always come up. So if you're buying in at cheaper prices, it'll be worth more in the long term.
Right.
So the important thing is work with your financial advisor, planner, if you're close to retirement, to make sure you're invested appropriately. But in almost every situation, you want to stick to your original plan that you planned, whether it was for college, for retirement, and continue to invest, continue to add those contributions, and make sure you're on that target. But in times like this, the worst mistake you can make is stop investing or sell your investments to cash.
And then so I'm going to kind of finish up this interview with a simple question that's going to kind of be 3 parts. Why does someone need a financial planner? When do you hire a financial planner? And how do you go about it? Like FINRA or whatever the case is.
Yep. So I would recommend looking to utilize a financial planner, financial advisor when you're in that baby step 4. And if we remember, pay off the debt, put that emergency fund in place, then I would look to hire a financial advisor, financial planner. There's really no reason before that situation to pursue a financial advisor. They're really going to set you up with the best retirement account. Make sure you're invested correctly. Picking, reviewing, and utilizing the right mix of mutual funds is important. Maximizing your return that you get year after year. If you're not invested correctly, that will really impact your future and your retirement. You know, maybe you could have retired a few years earlier if you were invested correctly. So I would say once you've reached that step 4 and you're ready to invest. The why is really time and resources. You know, a financial advisor has the time to really put in to pick the mutual funds, to review the funds, and make sure they're appropriate for your personal situation.
To understand a prospectus.
Yep, those prospectuses are about that thick, and nobody wants to sit there and read through a prospectus. An advisor's job is really to make sure you're invested correctly and it's performing the way it needs to. There's tons of regulation that's constantly coming out and being updated in the investment profession, even in the tax world that affects your investments. So keeping up with that is very tough. There are people that enjoy doing it themselves, which is fine, and they're in the minority. If you have the time, the resources to handle it, it's fine. But for the majority of people, they feel like it's best to have a professional look over their investments.
Absolutely. It's a second set of eyes that really know what they're looking at and what they're looking for, as opposed to, you know, I might own a business and I might understand a prospectus to some degree, but I also don't have a ton of time with small kids being able to read something that thick on different things. And so, like, that's why we hire a financial advisor and everything else, and that's why we use that service, whereas you may use that, you may not, but that would be my suggestion, is to use that.
Yep, and the advisor will, you know, have you on board with every decision. So he's kind of he or she's the quarterback of the process, but you are absolutely involved. You should know what you're invested in, why you're invested, and he's really just kind of steering you in the right direction.
Now, of course, I'm going to put a plug, and I'll put your website down in the description box so that people can find you easier and everything else. Anything else that you would like to say? Yeah,
it's been a pleasure. I'd be happy to answer any questions at all related to anything financial related. You know,
the different scenarios that people might have and so forth.
Feel free to shoot questions away. I know this time just kind of gives, you know, people a little bit of uncertainty, and if anybody has questions, concerns, you know, feel free to ask.
Absolutely. And I want to just say thank you for coming on our show. Thank you for talking to people, because I've heard this question and I've heard, you know, and felt stress in people's bodies that were like stressed out about the markets or about job possibilities and so forth. And so I was like, you know, that would be a really good topic to cover during these times right now. So I appreciate you coming on and helping us out with that.
It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed it, and yeah, hopefully this has eased some people's minds about their finances.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.